What's going on, everybody? It's me back again for another video, and today I'm going to be telling you the story about how I slept with not just any one of my frat brothers, but the president of another chapter of my fraternity back in college. Alright, this is going to be a spicy one, so let's jump right into it. Alright, so just for a little background, I joined a fraternity back in college, and in the first semester that I joined, a couple months in actually, they let me know and a few of the other guys, because it was a pretty small frat, that they were actually having a regional conference coming up at a different part of the country. And like I said, there weren't that many guys in the frat at this point, and the other couple guys just didn't really want to go. They didn't really want to deal with the expenses of traveling, and honestly just didn't want to mess with a trip. But I, on the other hand, physically cannot say no to the opportunity to travel. It's like a contractual agreement with my soul at this point that if a trip comes up, if I have like any chance to take a trip, that I'm going to take it no matter what the cost. So that actually has led to a lot of adventures that I had in college, but in this particular one, it led me to this story. So what happened was they told us about the conference, and the conference was coming up in like 2 weeks. I think that was another reason some of the guys didn't really want to take the trip, because it was so last minute, but I was fully willing to like miss any assignment or test coming up just so I could go on this trip, because it was in a part of the country that I'd never been before. So anyway, the trip rolls around, I pack my bags, I fly out, they paid for the flight, it was pretty good. I get to the hotel, and they had told me before that I was going to have a hotel room, and I was like, sweet, that's awesome, I'm going to have a hotel room to myself, it's going to be a pretty chill conference, there's not that much going on, it'll give me a chance to see a part of the country I'd never been to before, and it's all going to be great. And that is when I get to the hotel, and I am checking into my room, and I had been kind of texting back and forth with the coordinator of the conference. We had met back at my college, and he was kind of responsible navigating the new chapter of our frat, because it was still pretty new at the time, it was pretty small, so we had chatted back and forth, and he was going to be at this conference. So I was kind of texting him, letting him know I arrived, and he said, great, the other guys in your room shouldn't be there for a couple hours. And at this point I kind of paused, because I was like, I had thought I was getting my own room. And I don't know that I would have agreed to this trip had I known that I had to be sharing a room. And I talked to the lady at the front desk, telling her what room I was supposed to be in and my name, and she had confirmed that there were 3 other guys staying in the room from a different chapter. So I was kind of shocked at this point, and I really didn't like sharing spaces with guys, or really anybody. I really wanted to have my own room. I had my own dorm room back at college. Dealing with roommates was such a nightmare, so I asked this lady, like, hey, is there any other way that I can get a different room? I don't care if it's a little more expensive. I will pay for it. It's worth it. I really just don't want to share a room with strangers. And she was like, unfortunately, no, the hotel is booked up for the weekend. It's last minute. I think it was a Saturday. It looked like it was a pretty busy, nice hotel. So I was like, fine, whatever. Like, I was just going to have to deal with it. I was already there. So I go up to the room, get my bags, walk into the door, and I realized that there are only 2 beds in this hotel room. And what's immediately popping into my mind is that there are 4 guys, including me, in this hotel room, and there are only 2 beds. And this becomes a very important part of the story later. So I go in, I set my bags down, I go kind of to the far bed in the hotel room, because I like it. It's closer to the heating and the air conditioning. It was pretty cold that time of year. We were up north, and I wanted to be close to that in case it gets cold, and I also like looking out the window, and plus it just feels like a little more isolated than being in the bed that's like right by the front door. It's what I always choose if I'm in a hotel room. The weather is also important to this time of year, because I go back down to the lobby. I had all my stuff put away, and I was kind of thinking like, oh, I have some time, there's not really any events planned, so maybe I can go out, I can explore the city a little bit, mess around. There's not really anything to do except kill time, so I was kind of like playing around on my phone, seeing what's around, and I kind of realized that the hotel was honestly in the middle of nowhere. Like, it was going to take me 30 minutes to get to any decent part of the city. I think there was like a Burger King and a Wendy's in the hotel parking lot, but like that wasn't really anything worth spending time on. And I thought about trying to get an Uber because I thought maybe that would be worth it, but honestly this trip was already kind of expensive and I didn't want to be spending more money on an Uber. And I had heard rumor and checked the weather app to confirm that it was supposed to start snowing. And I was worried that if I took an Uber out into the city, that in like 30 minutes it was going to start basically blizzarding and I was going to be trapped and I wasn't going to be able to get back to the hotel, and that was going to be a whole nightmare. So basically I just decided that I was going to stay in the room, kill some time at the restaurant. I think I ended up walking to like the Burger King and eating there, doing some work on my laptop. It was pretty dead, honestly. Like I said, the weather was getting kind of bad, snow was starting to come down, there wasn't really anybody checking in or out of the hotel at this point because it was still kind of early, and honestly, she said they were booked, but I think they were just like, I think it was kind of a slow day. I don't know, I really didn't see that many people, or honestly, maybe she was just lying because she knew I was part of the conference and she didn't want, like, the frat boys getting into bigger trouble by, booking out more of the rooms and then having more space just to, like, mess around, which, like, honestly ended up working out in my favor. So anyway, I spent a few hours away from the hotel room and eventually I decide that I need to go back. It was getting a little later in the afternoon and I wanted to just like check on my stuff, see what was going on. So I get back to the hotel room and the other guys had already gotten there. They looked like they had been there for a little bit, their stuff was all put away, they had gotten kind of comfortable. Two of the guys were sitting on the bed closest to me, and then there was a third guy sitting on what was essentially my bed that I had put my stuff near. And I walked in the room, they didn't really pay attention to me until the guy on the far bed, which was my bed, which now he was kind of sitting on my bed. He introduced himself, smiled, walked over, shook my hand. He introduced the two guys. They were all a member of the same chapter of the frat, so they had all knew each other, and I was just kind of like the odd person out, but he was so nice. He really was kind of like commanding the room, so before he even mentioned any of the dynamics of their fraternity, I could already tell that he was kind of like their leader. The other two guys were like a little more soft-spoken, laid back. They didn't really initiate any conversation with me. Meanwhile, this guy just kind of like stands up, walks over, introduces himself to me, starts talking. It was a great time. We're going to call him Brandon. And that's not just out of anonymity, it's because I genuinely don't remember his name, but I think his number's still in my phone, so I could probably check, but I'm not going to do that. But anyway, so he introduces himself, and he actually mentions to me that he is the president of the chapter of his fraternity, which makes total sense, because I think this was kind of like a leadership retreat, so it makes sense that they were all like officers of their frat, and based on just kind of the dynamics of their group, it makes sense that he was the president, because like I said, he was obviously kind of like in charge. But anyway, we got to know each other, we talked for a little bit. They were kind of sitting on their bed talking about some YouTube videos they were watching, and then me and Brandon kind of sat around on the bed and we were just kind of like chatting, talking about the different chapters of our frat. We were talking about the school I went to versus the school they went to. They were kind of asking me questions about my chapter, I was asking them questions about theirs, and it was a pretty good time. And we just kind of sat around chatting for like an hour until it was time for dinner, and then we all walked together down to the restaurant at the hotel. There was kind of a convention center too, but it wasn't really going to be set up till the next day, so all the people who had gotten there the night before the conference kind of met up and chatted at the restaurant. We were there for a few hours, people had drinks, it was a good time, the food was pretty good. Skip a few hours later and we were going back to the hotel room. Alright, so we're back at the hotel room and it's getting kind of late. We've all had some stuff to eat, they had had a few drinks, and we decided that it's basically time to get ready for bed. And the conversation came up about who was going to take a shower and who was going to shower first or later or in the morning. And I had mentioned that I had already showered before they got there because I was there like 4 hours before they got there. And the other two guys in the separate bed decided that they were just going to shower in the morning. So that meant that Brandon was the only one who was going to shower that night, which like, whatever. I just didn't want to have to fight with the shower, so that's why I did it earlier. Anyway, so this is when he takes off his shirt, and I'm just gonna say he was in pretty good shape. He had pretty great abs. And of course, frat guys, anytime somebody like starts taking off their clothes, the other two guys from his chapter start like whistling and yelling and being like, oh, nice abs, and like talking about how sexy he was. And of course they were all like laughing, and I was kind of like, I didn't really want to joke or anything because I didn't know them that well, but he was kind of like dancing for him and like doing a little like thrusting, and they were all just kind of like laughing and whatever before Brandon walks into the bathroom, closes the door behind him, and turns on the shower. So he was in there for maybe like 20-30 minutes. The other guys decided that they were just going to go to bed. I think they were tired. They had a longer, I flew in, and I think they just drove, but their drive was a lot longer than my flight, so they were all pretty tired, so they shut the lights off, and the other two go to bed. And I decide, because I'm just a night owl and I wasn't that tired, that I was going to sit up in the chair, kind of in the corner of the room with my little book light, and just read for a little while Brandon was in the shower, because he was awake anyway, so I didn't really have to worry about that. So anyway, time goes by, I'm reading for a little bit, and eventually 20-30 minutes later I hear the water go off and he gets out of the shower. So at this point, the other two guys, I'm pretty sure they were asleep. It's kind of hard to say, but like they hadn't been moving for a little while and the lights were off, it was dark, so I'm pretty sure they were just asleep over there. So I'm on my own corner of the hotel room. Brandon walks over and he is just wearing a towel, and let me just say, the sight of him walking across the hotel room, water dripping down his abs, towel very low on his waist, he walks right up to me, just like stomach inches away from my face, and asks me about the book I'm reading. And honestly, I have no clue what book I was reading. I have literally no recollection of that. But what I do remember is just how close his abs were to my face, and exactly what I was thinking about in that moment. But anyway, I wanted to play it cool, so we spent a few minutes chatting about the book, just kind of like whatever. I'm sure I thought it was an interesting book and I had stuff to say about it. It was probably just some like science fiction something. But anyway, as I am telling him about this book and we're just kind of like having a conversation, lots of eye contact, he's kind of looking at me, as I am telling him, maybe mid-sentence, he's like walking over to his suitcase, he's trying to get some of his stuff together. He pulls out a pair of like cotton blue boxer brief, just like underwear. At this point he's only wearing a towel, and in the middle of a sentence I remember like distinctly that he just drops his towel, uses it to kind of like shake off his hair, and then while I'm talking to him, we're making eye contact at this point, he literally just like then drops his towel on the floor, grabs the underwear, and then just like pulls them up and just kind of like loosely around his waist. They seem like they were kind of like a sexy pair, but like they also look like they weren't anything special. They weren't like fancy briefs or anything. I think they were just like a pair of like Calvin Klein boxer briefs or whatever, but just like my jaw dropped because I'm just like standing there having a conversation, we're making eye contact, and then he's just naked in front of me, like 3 feet from me, which like honestly kind of a fantasy. Like we're in a hotel, he's one of my frat brothers, we are in a different city, it's cold, it's snowing outside, I love traveling, so I'm already just like in a pretty good mood about it. And this entire time he just like doesn't really like, he just keeps talking to me, like clearly like this wasn't a deal for him, and like it was just completely normal for him to be naked around his like frat brothers. I guess they just like lived in a house together, they were comfortable, so like clearly he didn't have any qualms about like being naked in front of other guys, which like I'm not gonna complain about. Alright, so at this point it was time to go to bed, and he's standing in front of the bed, just kind of off to like his side. I think his side was the side closest to the wall, and I'm just kind of like sitting in my chair still, like doing whatever, half talking to him, half reading my book. And he's like, hey, are you sure that you still want to sleep in that chair? Because I had mentioned earlier they just kind of walked in. I had my stuff sort of on the bed, but then like they kind of came in, so I moved my stuff over to more of the chair because I was just kind of thinking like, I don't really want to share a bed with a stranger. Like, we're adults, it's kind of weird that you would like put people who don't know each other in the same room and then ask them to share a bed. Like, that's the whole point of why I wanted a different room, because I was like, I don't want to share a bed with a stranger. Then he was asking me like, are you sure you want to sleep in the chair? Is that okay with you? Like, you don't have to if you don't want to, like you can sleep in the bed with me. So like he wasn't offering to take the chair, he was offering for me to come sleep in the bed with him. And I had thought about it. I was kind of like going back and forth in my head because like I still wasn't really sure, but at the same time like I had been sitting in this chair for the last 30 minutes reading and like it wasn't very comfortable. The heating in this hotel room was not great. Like I said, at this point the snow was like coming down. Like we were getting like we were basically getting like hammered by a blizzard, and we were already like pretty high up in the hotel, so the air outside was like freezing. Like I could feel the cold just like radiating from the windows. So I was like, here are my options. I can either sleep in a warm, comfortable hotel bed with like a really good looking frat guy, or I can stay alone in the corner in an uncomfortable chair, basically freezing my ass off all night because like it was cold and like I had not brought a thick enough blanket for like sleeping by myself, and like the comforter on the hotel bed was starting to look really good. So I was kind of sitting there hesitating. In my head it was only like a couple seconds of thinking, but I guess I had taken longer than that because like before I even said anything he just kind of like looked at me and he's like, it's pretty cold over there, like if you share the bed with me I promise to keep you warm. And he kind of like winked and nodded, and I was just like, whatever. Like he was cute, he was a little flirty, and like kind of in the way that like all the frat guys were with each other. So like I wasn't really thinking about it, but I was like, you know what, whatever, it's harmless, like I'm gonna get in the bed. So I got in the bed. I kind of took my sweatpants off or whatever pants I was wearing and just was basically wearing like a plain t-shirt and kind of like boxers or something, I guess, or maybe briefs. I don't really remember what I was wearing, but it was basically just my shirt and my underwear, and I get in the bed with him, and like that's kind of all that I think is gonna happen. Whatever, like it's fine. We're in bed together. Like he's kind of like making some jokes like, oh, like fantasy, like sleeping with your frat brother, like haha, like it's a dream come true. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like he's just kind of like the guy who like flirts with people. He kind of like breaks down their walls. He's very like personable, friendly. Like that's why he's in charge of his own fraternity, because like he's very good at like making connections with people. He makes people feel like safe and comfortable, and also he's just like really attractive, so like he's nice to look at. But anyway, so probably like 5 minutes go by, and like I'm having a hard time because I'm just kind of like couldn't quite get comfortable, but like it was miles ahead of being in the chair, but like I still couldn't quite get comfortable. So I was kind of shifting around, like just trying to find a spot to get me comfortable. And honestly it was honestly just like my shirt and my underwear, because like normally I don't wear anything when I go to sleep, so I wasn't really used to it. So I was just having a hard time going to sleep, and I guess he picked up on this because he was asking me, he's like, are you okay? Like, just like you're kind of shifting around. Like he was like, can't get comfortable. Like, so I was like, yeah. Like honestly, like he had been flirting at this point, so I was like, I just told him, I was like, yeah, normally I don't sleep with any clothes on, so like this is a little different for me. And he was like, no worries, like that's not that big of a deal, I don't really care. And I was like, no, like it's fine, like I don't want to like bother you, it's really not that big of a deal, I'm sure I'll go to sleep. And he's like, no, really, like it's fine, like I sleep naked all the time, don't even worry about it, like it's not that big of a deal. And we both just like kind of laughed because I couldn't really tell if he was kidding or not. And then just maybe like 30 seconds or a minute go by, and then I start feeling him kind of like shift under the blankets, and I look over, and from under the blankets he pulls out his underwear. So he had taken it off, pulls it out, shows it to me, and says, see, it's fine, I don't care if you sleep naked. And then he throws some on the ground, and I was kind of just like, first of all, couldn't believe that that was happening, like what's going on. But at this point, like we had been kind of chatting for like a couple hours, just like getting to know each other. He was really sweet, he was nice, he was really good looking, and there's a blizzard outside, we're in a different city, and I'm lying in bed with the naked president of a chapter of my own frat. And I was like, this isn't gonna happen again. So like in like 10 seconds I took off my shirt and underwear, and we were both naked in this hotel bed. Mind you, this is when there were two guys sleeping in the bed next to us, and we probably weren't being as quiet as we should be, but we were also like kind of like whispering, like trying to keep our laughter just like a little bit chill. Like we didn't want to wake them up, especially if we were being like flirty and like talking about getting naked under the bed. Like we didn't need them hearing that, even though they were probably sleeping in their underwear too, so like it's not that big of a deal. But Anyway, it was cold. We were both still kind of cold. At this point, we were both naked in the hotel bed. He comments about it being cold. I comment about it being cold. We're laughing a little bit, laughing about like using body heat, and like honestly, like it wasn't that cold, but at this point we were just kind of like looking for an excuse to get near each other. And that's what we did. Maybe after about 5 minutes of just kind of like going back and like inching closer to each other, eventually we were basically just like pressed against each other. It was honestly really hot and neither of us were cold anymore. So yeah, at that point we were both naked in bed together with two guys in the bed next to us, and we ended up not sleeping very much that night. As you can probably expect, we were awake for most of the night, and then the next morning came around and we had only gotten like 3-4 hours of sleep, and we both looked like we had gotten hit by a truck. So yeah, that is the story of how I hooked up with the president of a chapter of my frat. It was pretty hot. Thankfully, that was only night 1 of 3 nights on this trip. If you guys want to hear more about that trip or want me to make another video, then I can definitely do that. Just let me know down in the comments, and I'm more than happy to tell you. And I have a bunch of other stories, so thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time.